Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 54.
Ben, did you know that a Rubik's Cube has 54 colored squares on it?
I mean, I know that 9 times 6 is 54, but I guess I'd never counted them.
But you see, these are the kind of facts that exist in your brain, but until you think about it, you just don't know. 54 colored squares on a Rubik's Cube. Also, that 54 is the fewest points ever scored in an NBA playoff game.
Total between both teams?
No, that would have been awesome. But no, it was a 1998 playoff game, the Chicago Bulls versus the Utah Jazz. Chicago scored 96 and Utah scored 54.
Awesome. I was a huge Bulls fan back then, so I was probably watching that game. Oh, no, wait. That would have been while I was a missionary, so probably not.
That is shameful, Utah. The entire state of Utah should be ashamed of itself for that performance in 1998.
New low record.
Lastly, the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994. Go Rangers! That was 54 years after they had previously won the Stanley Cup.
Is that like the longest time between two wins?
I don't know, but it calls into question how old is the freaking Stanley Cup?
Well, yeah, I think they're going to run out of space on it eventually. I was really excited when I was living in St. Louis and we won the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup a couple years ago, and a friend of mine sent me a picture of him like holding it. It was great.
Well, we talked about the Stanley Cup on the podcast before, and they're never going to run out of room because there's like a certain number of rings on it where they engrave the teams that win, and when they're all full, the last one, the oldest one, drops off and goes into some museum somewhere, and they just put a fresh blank one on top.
Oh, okay. Well, I forgot that part, so thanks for the reminder.
You should listen to this great podcast called Bad at Magic. We talk about all sorts of things.
Speaking of past episodes of Bad at Magic, there's something I want to follow up from last time. We talked about Herbie Goes Bananas, or the Disney series of movies about an anthropomorphic Volkswagen Beetle with the number 54 on it. Or 53, sorry, because that was in episode 53. Anyway, I realized something from my childhood that I hadn't made the connection, and I got a question for you. Josh, do you have a coffee shop pseudonym?
A coffee shop pseudonym?
Like if you go to a place where you give them an order for something and then they ask you for your name so they can yell it out loud so you know it's your turn, what do you tell them?
I used to do this. I don't do that now, but I used to do this at restaurants when I was in college and then as a younger man before I met my wife and she turned me into a person instead of an animal.
What was it?
I would mix it up.
You just, whatever amused you at the moment.
Whatever popped into my head. A lot of times it was Chuck. One time I was Duke. I tried to get like a long German surname, but they wouldn't do it. They just did like Von. Like this.
Yeah. You exceeded the short-term memory register.
Yeah, it's like Von Helderschmixein, and they said Von. That's all they got from it.
Yeah, see, I wanted to pick one that was close enough that they would raise an eyebrow at me and wonder if it was true or not. So I heard someone say this about having, I think it was on the Hello Internet podcast. They talked about having a coffee shop pseudonym because CGP Grey is notoriously reluctant to let people see his face or know his identity or those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So he was talking about his coffee shop pseudonym, and I thought I should get one of those. So mine I picked, it just was the first thing that came to my head, is Paco.
Is that the kid in the Herbie show? Or in the Herbie
It is
movies?
the kid in the Herbie show. That you made the connection really fast. But I didn't, at the time, I didn't know why that was my name, but that was the name I want to be called by. It's a cute little kid in Herbie.
You absolutely do not look like a Paco in any way, shape, or form.
So they look at me and they kind of raise their eyebrow and they're like, okay. One time I got the cutback with TACO written on it. I was like, no.
Taco? That's awesome. I like that one better.
At least they wouldn't ask me how to spell it.
Well, don't settle on any one thing now. You've got to try out a bunch. Like here, next time you go, I want you to try this and see the reaction you get. Like, oh, what's the name for the order? And just like straight face Jennifer.
I kind of like the idea of having one that belongs to me. It's like my alternate identity, Paco. But Jennifer, okay.
Well, now, here's a question then to follow up on that. Like, what's your gamer handle?
So This is a good space. I don't think the podcast has gone into this space yet because you and I were right at the beginning of the online gaming age where we might have had a chance at some point in time to have been the first person ever to register a particular name and not have to put numbers after it.
Maybe, but I don't know if I was there.
So I remember as a teenager, I loved reading the fantasy series by David Eddings, and so there was a character in there called Sparhawk. So I used to use that one, but it quickly got saturated and it was just everywhere. So at one point, I was playing the dumb game you have to play where you're trying to type in a gamer handle and you get like 6 or 7 failed tries in a row and you're finally like, what's even left? So I put Cougar Ben as in the mascot of my university and my first name. And so far, no one uses that one. So that's always what I am, is Cougar Ben.
That's cool. It's nice. It's unfortunate that it has your actual name in it.
And occasionally I get people think that I'm an older woman who likes younger men.
Oh, that could be entertaining, depending on the game that you're playing, and they think that. No,
What about you?
So I experienced kind of the same thing, but mine wasn't online when I first found mine. I remember distinctly playing MechWarrior 2 on my first PC when I was in middle school. I don't know if you ever played MechWarrior 2, but that game was baller.
I did. What a great fantasy to just put on a giant walking suit of armor full of guns and ammunition.
Oh, yeah. And just walk around and just decimate. I don't even remember reading like the mission summaries or what. It was always just, okay, I'm going to play until it says I'm done, which is usually just when I kill everybody else. But I was Talon, like a bird's claw Talon.
Okay. And was that derived from a fantasy book?
It was not. It was actually because the faction that I chose in that game were the Jade Falcons. And I was sitting there as this middle school kid like, oh, I am part of the Jade Falcon clan. Yes! And who am I? Well, I am the bringer of death of this clan. So I am the Jade Falcon Talon.
Okay, you're the weapon of a falcon.
Yeah, there you go. And the Talon, I just kept carrying the Talon with me as I went forward.
Now, that one sounds like eventually you started running into like it's already in use.
Oh, very much.
Problem.
All the time. If you ever looked at the registry I had of World of Warcraft characters, it always had Talon in it, and it was always misspelled, and it always had too many L's and too many N's, and maybe a U instead of an O, or maybe 2 O's, and just variations of the same thing, but it always would be pronounced Talon.
Okay. Well, listeners, if you have, I think this would be a good discussion for the Reddit. So if you want to go in and discuss your gamer handles, go to our subreddit on reddit.r/baditmagic and let us hear what your gamer handles are.
Can I gush for just one more second about my gamer handle?
Yeah.
Okay. So lately I've been adding, well, not lately, since college, I've been adding SMD to the front of it, and that's as a clan tag. And I don't know if you've ever seen that before in online games, where people put brackets or parentheses in front of something and then their gamer handle, and that's the clan that they belong to, right?
Okay.
So at the academy, I was part of the wargaming club after I became a sophomore, and
Wait! This is a game we play in our family where we don't know what an acronym stands for, and then we try to figure it out. I actually know what this one stands for, so I'm having trouble coming up with silly examples, though.
This is fair enough. I will never forget the night when we were playing, we sat down to play one of the LAN party games up in one of the academic buildings against all the other people that were on the server at the time. And they said, it's like, hey, your name's wrong. Like, what are you talking about? No, you got to put the clan in front of it. And I was so like the girl at the ball, I was like, picked to dance. It was like, I get to put the clan tag in front of my name. And I was just so happy and proud of it. It's
senior math dorks.
Haha, jerk. No. So we were the wargaming club at a military academy. So whenever an instructor asked, we always told them it stood for Students of Military Doctrine. But in reality,
I love it.
Inside of all the games, it stood for Something Must Die.
Something as in just, we're here to kill. We're here to chew gum and kill things, and we're all out of gum.
Yep, that was it.
Okay. Nice. Now, speaking of Something Must Die, so you and I are both veterans of the war in Afghanistan, and just this week, the last American soldiers were withdrawn from Afghanistan. And
Yes.
when the president gave one of his speeches kind of justifying his decision to the nation and talking about the situation, he talked about the impact that this is having on current and past members of the military who fought in Afghanistan. And I thought, I did kind of have some poignant feelings about the whole situation. What about you?
Not really. People have been asking me this all week. It's like, oh, what do you think about this thing in Afghanistan? And I'm over here like, I don't know. I feel like I'm the only person on the planet that is not surprised at all at everything that has happened. One, it's a political crapshoot for everybody that's ever been involved or said the words Afghanistan on public television, going back multiple presidencies. And the country itself is turning into this power vacuum of random organizations that all say that they're in charge now. And like, I'm just over here shrugging, like, what did we expect was going to happen?
I don't think that's about not having feelings about it, though. I mean, it's just kind of the usual Josh approach to things. You're nonplussed, but you still have opinions on the issue. Okay, I think, of the two of us, you've probably killed way more people in Afghanistan than I have.
Cannot confirm or deny.
Yeah. But, I met people there. I wouldn't say I had any friends there, but I definitely during my 6 months there kind of developed an affinity for the people in that I overcame any mental hurdles I had about thinking them as like me in a weird kind of way.
They're just people. And that's the thing that everyone needs to learn. Like, just go travel and see foreign cultures. This is the thing. The Afghans are just people. They're just like everybody else. The only thing that's radically different is their history, their culture, and their society. And we went in there with this idea that we were going to supplant this 1,000 years of indoctrination and culture with, oh, well, this is way better. Just trust us. Do it this way. And we were shocked that it didn't work.
Typical American audaciousness.
Well, it's what do you always say? It's culture eats doctrine for breakfast.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Like, if we were to have any chance of success at actually indoctrinating these people with any kind of different values, we would have to have been there for 2 full generations.
Yeah. And we just didn't have the national willpower for that. And I don't know, a lot of the justification people are giving right now is how much, if we'd stayed longer, would the outcome have been any different? It would have to be a lot longer.
My very cynical view on the whole thing is that we went in there with the intent of disrupting the entire terrorist organization that had grown up in the shadow of the Taliban with their, they were just condoned by the local government, right? So I feel like we went in there just to bomb all these terrorist organizations back into their holes after 9/11.
It was just vengeance. It was just showing the world that we wouldn't be cowed by the terrorists of September 11th.
Exactly. But Ben, we're not vengeful people. We're Americans. No, we're the
good
guys.
Foot stuck in the door.
We have to maintain the moral high ground. So, okay, we just bombed a bunch of you. That's our bad. But you know what? We're going to give you the greatest gift that anyone could ever give. Democracy and freedom. Hooray!
Yeah. Now you're starting to sound like Stephen Colbert.
Well, intentionally. Because it, like you said, that whole initial push into there was vengeance. And then it was all of these, oh, crap, well, that's probably not the best thing for us to do from a moral standpoint in the international stage. So how do we justify us being there now?
I remember thinking about this much more deeply when I was there. When I was looking around and I took rockets being shot at me and had to run into the bunker about 12.5 times while I was there, but I wasn't ever really taking effective direct fire. But I was pondering, what are we doing here? Well, is it even possible to accomplish our objectives? And there's this huge gulf I could sense between the mission that we were given and kind of the apathy or antagonism of the actual American troops on the ground. They didn't feel camaraderie and commonality with these people. There was just tension and frustration.
Well, how are you supposed to feel camaraderie with people that you're supposed to be friendly to them, but you're still wearing body armor because they could try to kill you at any moment?
That's no joke, Josh. 2 of my friends were killed, at close range by trusted Afghans while I was there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So this is the juxtaposition that these army guys were in this entire time, and it's no wonder that they come back. Not only the fact they were there for 18 months at a stretch with barely any leave to come home and see their families, but then living in this constant like, oh, you have to be their friends, but don't let them kill you, but be friendly, but don't take your body armor off, and have your gun ready, but sit down and have lunch with them, and build them schools, but don't die. Like that's going to rip you in half mentally the entire time.
It sounded like you were being hyperbolic, but that wasn't hyperbole at all.
No.
Like, what you described is exactly what it was like.
I remember the first time I realized when I was deployed there that this was never going to work, and we had no idea what we were doing. When somebody on the base that I was at decided, you know what, we need like a cleanup crew. We need somebody to come in and just like pick up trash and like clean latrines and just do some grunt work. That's outreach to the local community and give some people some jobs for what we would see as like almost no pay, and they would see as a tremendous amount of pay. And so the mayor hut, and those couple of guys went and set up a little folding table outside, and they said, "Oh, we are hiring a handful of people to come work in the base. Come talk to us if you want the job." And there's a bunch of dudes that started lining up. And then this elderly gentleman, Afghan, walked to the front of the line, stood next to the table, and told everybody there, "If you want to work for the Americans, you have to talk to me first." And then the entire line just took 2 steps over and lined up in front of him instead. And then at the card table, the guy's like, no, we have no idea who this guy is. You can just talk to us. And nobody listened to them. And this guy was the deciding factor on who got to take this 2 steps to the left to the table where the Americans were. And then he collected half of the paycheck that these guys were collecting. And he didn't do any work. He just like walked around and followed them while they were doing all the work.
And I bet we don't even have a clue who that guy was or why he wielded so much authority over the group. And the fact that we didn't understand that points to why this whole thing fell apart like it did.
Well, that level of just, I don't know if you want to call it bureaucracy
tribalism
or grafting or just the whole society is just night and day different from what we're used to. And our form of government is very much tied to our culture. You can't replace one without replacing the other.
So it's interesting in this discussion, you have said they're humans just like us, and they're so entirely different from us we can't understand them. So how do those two things exist in your mind at the same time?
Let me be clear then. They are people. People are people are people. Their culture is so inherently different from ours that when we start like looking at it from the outside, we can't understand it. Things won't make sense because we view certain things and we inherently think it's wrong. And for them, that's just how they get things done.
Yeah. There was a report that General Petraeus commissioned while I was there where he was trying to get to the bottom of this. There's this notorious diagram that goes around the internet where they brought in this like think tank group of researchers that came in and learned the language and did a big study and said, you know, if the general says, what are my buttons and dials and what are the interrelated concepts? And they made this diagram. And it's so notorious that if you Google world's worst PowerPoint, it comes up as the first image result. It's this rat's nest of colored arrows pointing back and forth across to each other. And, you know, this culture and this regional influence and these agricultural and weather and religion and all of the factors of everything surrounding it. How if you change one thing, it changes everything else, and it's all interrelated. I actually, while I was at War College, out at school in Norfolk, Virginia in 2018, back when we were still recording this podcast, one of the guys who made that came and spoke to us. And he did I think like 30 slide deck where he took it apart one little piece at a time. And when I got it like that, it all made sense. Like, it's just really complicated, and here's how it's complicated. And he took apart every single little bit of this chart. I'll put the graphics in the show notes and up on our Facebook page, so you can see it and see what I'm talking about. But the whole point I'm getting at with all of this is that General Petraeus brought in these guys, and they studied, and they found out there was just a few really base level fundamental contradictions between the Americans and the Afghans. Like, for instance, how do they treat a stray dog? The Americans would feed it, name it, and treat it like a pet. The Afghans would kick it. Both of them hated that about the other one. Just loathed it. The Afghans would get their paycheck and they would immediately go out and blow it all on like drugs and alcohol. The Americans would urinate in public. They both hated each other for it. The Afghans would steal things if it wasn't nailed down. The Americans found that highly offensive, even though there's only one thief in the army. The Americans would swear, and the Afghans were highly offended by that. The Americans would look at and or talk about women. The Afghans were highly offended by that. The Afghans were kind of lazy and didn't work really hard. The Americans were really offended by that. And there was just, it was Afghans are from Mars, Americans are from Venus, over and over and over again.
You reminded me of two things. So first of all, I have to get this joke out. That guy made a PowerPoint so bad that he now gets TED Talk deals to explain how bad his PowerPoint was.
Yes.
That's nuts. Like that. I want that job. Second, I remember getting a briefing halfway through my deployment in Afghanistan, and it was great. It was from the PSYOPs guy, the psychological operations guy. And he said, here are some rumors that are going around the Afghan community about American troops. Here are the ones that we want you to dispel, and here are the ones that we want you to reinforce.
What? Can you remember any of them?
I can remember a couple. It's like, okay, so one rumor going around is that everybody wears those Oakley wraparound shades that when you get out there because it's very bright. And so there's some rumor that says they're X-ray goggles and they're looking at everybody naked through their clothes. No, we don't do that. Show them, take off the glasses, let them look through, and then take them back. Like they're just normal glasses.
Okay, that's awesome.
The second one was that the Americans have some kind of cold pill that keeps them cool all day, even though they're wearing all of their gear and all of their armor and carrying it all around, and they can just go forever and not get tired, hot, sweaty, hungry, or thirsty. We want them to think that. That's fine.
That is awesome. Oh, man, that's great. And that sounds like such an army thing to say and do.
Yeah. They think weird things about us, and some of them are to our benefit.
Yeah, so let them think it. It's an accidental psyop.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, if all of the Monday morning quarterbacking that's going on, and there's a ton of it, nobody foresaw how fast the country would fall to the Taliban and our weapons would all fall into their hands. Because I don't think we would have left like we did if we knew how fast that was going to happen.
I guarantee we knew how fast that was going to happen.
No, we'd have blown everything up or something. You know, we wouldn't have just, okay, Afghan National Army, here's all the Humvees and helicopters that we promised. Cross your fingers and hope to die. You're not going to give them to the Taliban as soon as we leave.
Well, but at the same time, if we did put everything in a pile and blow it up right before we left, what does that say about us, our faith in the system?
Okay, so you think we knew that this was going to happen and we just had to give it to them because we painted ourselves into a corner?
Well, it's a game theory thing. If we leave all the assets,
give the whole graph.
If we leave all of the assets and everything goes according to plan, then we have supplied Afghans with much needed material.
So that's a W. That's a win scenario.
If we leave everything intact and the Taliban takes over, now they have a bunch of our weapons and equipment that we just gave to them. That's a loss.
Okay, that's a loss scenario.
If we blew everything up and everything went according to plan, now it looks like we don't trust the Afghan nation that we helped, quote unquote, build before we left.
Okay, loss scenario.
If we blow everything up and the Taliban comes back in, they still took over the country. We still look like losers, and we look like we knew that it was going to happen when we blew everything up before we left.
Okay, so that's kind of a loss as well.
That's kind of a medium one, but that's like the only win in that scenario is if we left everything intact and the government held.
So we were just, you know what they always say in the military, though, right? Hope is not a strategy.
Yeah. So somebody thought it was a good idea. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure we took and or blew up the really good stuff.
No, I think we captured it, the essence of it. Listeners, if you're wondering what our perspective is, at least here, I think Josh and I kind of got it right at the beginning. That we went in immediately for vengeance and stayed for freedom and got our foot caught in the door. And it ultimately ended up in this game theory scenario where we just had to get out and did the best we could. And yeah, it went badly, but we didn't really have any other choice.
It's a lot like what happens when you get stuck in a conversation with the local elder. Like, you feel bad if you just tell him off and walk away, so you kind of have to sit there and keep talking to him.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a joke. You're taking this very seriously.
Oh, I thought you were saying you actually did this. I was trying to imagine you. Did you use a translator?
Oh no, no, I'm not.
Oh,
not an
you didn't
Afghan
mean
elder.
you didn't mean tribal elder in a village. You meant Mormon missionaries.
Yes, I did. That's exactly what I meant.
Okay, joke received.
Oh gosh, because it fell so flat. I was like, oh geez, that did not
Well,
land well at
local
all.
elder. Okay, now I'm wondering what our listeners thought. I'm assuming they thought like I did when you said local elder. You meant tribal person in Afghanistan.
No, I'm sorry. I meant LDS missionary. Like
Okay.
I need to be more clear with my verbiage. Sorry.
Well, Josh, this week I made a return to in-person Magic.
Mm.
So I haven't played in-person Magic in like a year and a half, and I gotta say the magic is still there.
But roll credits. That's it, everybody. Thanks. Tip your waitresses. We'll be here all week.
I still get a thrill playing in-person Magic that I don't get playing online.
The last time I played in-person Magic, Ben, was with you when we first did this podcast.
Wow. Holy cow.
It's been a minute.
Okay, so this feeling I got reminded me of something. It reminded me of this interview I heard with Tom Brady, the NFL football player who won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, who had a historic career with the New England Patriots and just refuses to hang it up. And somebody was asking him, like, Tom, you've had an unparalleled career. Why don't you just hang it up like everybody does your age? Just do commercials and live Lux for the rest of your life. And he proceeded to explain that basically there's no substitute for the game of football in his life. And he kind of talked about a few things, but I realized it really is kind of singular. There aren't things in our life like this. And he described, like, for instance, when it's late in a game and you're coming from behind and you're winning and you're running up and down the sideline and you're shouting and your hands are in the air and you're pumping people up and you're looking them in the eye and the crowd cheers and stuff. And I think, man, I don't have anything like that in my life, like not even close. And if he just hangs up his, his cleats and helmet and stops, I mean, there's nothing in life that compares to that.
Most likely no. Well, we could come up with some fringe scenarios, but you're right. I mean, being a professional athlete seems to be a pretty unique thing in existence today.
But when I play Magic in person, I get a little bit of that. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Like, well,
it doesn't even have
that I don't get anywhere else.
Well, it doesn't have to be what Tom Brady said, but like what you said there at the beginning is that it's a totally unique experience that you don't get any other time in your life. That is Magic. Going to a giant tournament with all these people and playing a game and having these shared experiences. You sit across from somebody you have never met in your life. You can both complain and sympathize about Manascrew every time, no problem.
Yeah. And there's the camaraderie piece, but then there's also the, like, I am going to grind this guy into the dirt. I got that little bit of edge to me where I'm feeling really competitive. Not like where I'm going to rules lawyer them or be the sourpuss on the other side of the table that won't answer cordial questions.
No, I have to be that guy for you because you don't know the rules well enough, apparently.
Okay, so there's a couple other things I want to talk about with that. One is that I went up to the counter to register for the event, and I tried to give them my DCI number, which stands for Duelist Convocation International. It's a really old legacy thing related to Magic that has a long story behind it that I don't know. But basically, there's like this independent organization that they use for tracking your performance in the Magic casual and basically organized play. Well, and I think they've completely stopped using it.
They've stopped using it?
Yes.
Oh, this is news to me. What do they do now?
So they're like, do you have MTG Companion? I'm like, what's that? They're like, it's an app on your phone that's tied to your Wizards account that's associated with your email address. It's not necessarily associated with your DCI number at all. That's kind of been abandoned. So I installed this app on my phone, and then when you go to register an event, they just have a code. You put in your phone, they approve that you've paid, and then it puts you into this pool where there's a two-way communication between their event reporter and your device happening. And it is so great, Josh.
Technology wins again.
Oh my gosh. Remember how when a round would start, everybody would have to go huddle around a piece of paper and, squint and try to figure out what table number? No. Now you get a notification in your pocket of who your opponent is.
That's awesome.
And then you put the result directly into the app on your phone, and it goes into the system.
That's cool. And I'm sure there's some kind of dispute system where if one guy tries to get in there and say, oh, I won, but he didn't.
Right. So there's administrative control over it, but you also then while you're during the round, you can go in and see your statistics and all of the other players. It has a life counter. It has a card database that's actually pretty good. It's the best card database I've seen Wizards put out. So anyway, MTG Companion, first time I'd used it. Every time I've used it, other than the fact that I want it to do a few more things, it's great. I love it. I can't wait to do a big tournament where you don't have to do that thing at the beginning of every round where you go huddle around a board and try to figure out where your next round's going to be.
Listeners, if you've never been to a Magic tournament, imagine 500 like sweaty, below average
Smelly.
Personal hygiene people trying to crowd around a spreadsheet that's printed out at like size 10 font that has proper nouns in just rows and rows and rows. It takes forever and it's terrible.
Yeah. So in-person Magic still more fun than digital, and it definitely improved because of MTG Companion. That's all I have to say about that.
Jealous. Very jealous over here.
So you told me this week, you sent me a text or something that you felt like you'd leveled up in life, and I thought that was an interesting idea. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Well, it was just kind of this weird singular experience. I don't know if I've ever actually felt it happen before. And so I've been studying for the CPA exam, the Certified Public Accountant exam, and I've taken one. There's 3 left, and it's just subject material that I'm trying to cram into my brain, and it's grueling, Ben. It's taking supreme willpower to keep up on it. But
good on you for sticking with it.
Thanks. But what I noticed is that while I'm doing all of this studying to be a certified public accountant, I am also currently employed as an accountant. And the other day I was at work and having a discussion with the other accountant and realized that the things that I was saying or the decisions that I was making were being directly influenced by the study material that I had read not like a week before. So this was like the first time where I recognized that things that I was reading on a page and being tested on and trying to make sure that it just tried to remember. This is the first time I've actually felt it change my weighted average decision-making process in real time.
So other than this just being a hurdle you have to overcome to get the 3 letters after your name, you also felt like it was useful knowledge for the practice.
I know, like, in the back of your head, you always know, like, stuff like this, you know it's going to be useful, like, in an abstract sense.
Yeah.
The same, like, when you're in college, like, oh, yeah, this stuff is important, and you can say that, but you don't ever really feel it. This is the first time where, in such a short span, where I learned something academically and then was put in a position to actually apply it practically. And it was just a unique feeling to be like, holy crap, this decision that I just made in my head was influenced by this material that I just read recently. And it was, like I said, it was a singularly unique experience in that I've never actually felt learning apply itself in my brain or click into place or adjust the mechanics of my decision-making process in real time like that.
That's good to know because for me, I have a heuristic in my mind that when I see that someone else has one of those certifications, I assume that means they have some kind of professional knowledge that they're able to apply to my situation. Like if I go to auto mechanic and they have one of those, CSE gears up on the wall, I think this person has done some kind of formal education that shows they know how to follow logical process and good engineering to fix my car. Or if I see, the dentist certificate up on the wall or the doctor or the lawyer or whatever, any professional that's gone through some type of rigorous certification system, I assume that their knowledge was at least some way relevant to the talk we're having right now.
So I do agree with you to a point because there's 2 different ways that I split up intelligence. And there is knowledge and then there is what I consider to be intelligence, which is practical application and problem solving.
Yeah.
Just because people get a tremendous amount of education doesn't necessarily mean that they're smart. Like everybody knows the person that's read all the books and has all the degrees, but like would get hit by a shopping cart in the Target parking lot if they didn't have their hand held.
Sure, and I don't think that my heuristic is exclusive of that. Like I don't think that just because someone did what it takes to have the certificate on the wall that says they're a doctor means that they aren't possibly an idiot. They could also be an idiot. But I do think that them having that certification means that they should have some kind of professional knowledge relevant to my situation.
Do you know what they call the last guy that graduates from medical school?
Doctor. All right. Well, in addition to your experience leveling up with your professional life, you've also been leveling up as a general contractor.
So let's be clear. I am not a general contractor. My dad and my brother, I think, are both general registered contractors.
Oh.
So technically, I violated a lot of Arizona state contractor law. It's one of those things.
Okay, but, so your shower started leaking into the wall, and instead of calling a plumber, you're like, I'm going to do it myself.
I gotta do this whole thing from the beginning, huh? All right. I don't know if I've told you this whole story. It's got ups and downs, and it's just been so long now. Anyway, yes. What we noticed was the first thing, the baseboards around the shower, like outside of the shower, around like where the door to the bathroom, like the little room where the toilet is in.
This is in the master bedroom?
This is the master bathroom.
Okay.
So the baseboards around outside of the shower started to swell. We noticed when the door started sticking. And it's just MDF, which is like basically sawdust glued together, and it will soak up water like a sponge. And it expanded, and everything was getting out of whack. Like, okay, this is a problem. Where's this water coming from?
Do you do that thing that everyone does as a homeowner? You're like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe I just spilled a bit of water on the floor and it soaked it up.
It took a couple of days before it got to the point where this is not going away. This something's happening here. So we have a home warranty because our air conditioners are old. And so we called the home warranty and we said, hey, we need a plumber to come out. And it's got to be the shower. Like that's the only source of water within 10 feet. It's got to be the shower somewhere, right? Right. And I'm not stupid. Like, yes, I was a pool guy, but I had to do a lot of physical, like contractor-y-esque things. So like, I know, like, okay, there's not water on the floor. It has to be coming from inside the wall. It's got to be soaking up this water from inside the wall. The only plumbing that's in this wall is the shower. The shower is probably leaking somewhere inside the wall. And this should have been red flags, but it wasn't at the time. I put in the work request at night, like probably 8 or 9 o'clock, and then I went to bed. And the next morning at like 7:05, I got a call from a guy that says, oh, hey, we got your request. I'm with this company. I'm going to be out there in 10 minutes. Is that okay?
What?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh,
is this real life?
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, come on out. So I thought that was cool. But then the guy came in. The guy was at my house for less than 10 total minutes.
Uh-huh.
He came in. He had no tools. He didn't even give me a business card or anything. And he had a moisture detector. One of those. It's got 2 prongs on it, and you stick it in the wall and tells you if it's wet.
Yeah.
And he goes in there and he's like poking. He's like, "Yep, there's water here, but it's definitely not a leak in the wall." And I'm like, "Well, there's a ton of. I mean, look at this swelling. Like it's swelled on the back side of the other side of the wall, away on the other side of the wall from the shower, like 3 feet back. Like there's a lot of water in this wall." And he's like, "I don't know, but there's no way it's leaking in the wall because all those pipes are under pressure, and if it was leaking, there'd be a lot more water." And that caught me off guard because, well, I mean, that's technically true.
Okay.
And so he tells me, like, whenever I see this, like 9 times out of 10, it's the shower enclosure. I will email you the number of my shower enclosure guy. He'll come out and take care of you. And boom, he was gone. I didn't get a business card. And I realized he didn't have my email address. He never emailed me. He didn't return any of my calls. And it was clear that this guy just wanted to. So
your home warranty just did the absolute minimum.
No, my home warranty was fine. They're just farming out. This is how home warranties work, is they shotgun out a request to all of their providers in my area.
I see.
And whoever snags it first is the ones that get to do the job and get paid for it.
Well, he collected money for that non-help. Although, I could see his logic. Like, yeah, if it's leaking you'd have puddles of water, so it's probably just the wastewater when you shower coming out.
Hang on a second, Ben, because then that night I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to watch this like a hawk while Nicole's using the shower, and I'm going to make sure that this isn't leaking. And I'm watching it, and there's not a drop of water coming out of this enclosure. And I'm like, this can't, so it can't be an enclosure. I'm not seeing any water. And then it clicked on me. Like, yes, the pipes are under pressure all the time, but not the shower pipe. Only the pipes to the
riser
valve.
that comes off where the valve is.
Yes. And I'm like, so that could be a way that it would have water less of the time. And then I started looking up at the shower head. And I'm like, and Nicole's like, what are you doing? I'm like, this water's coming from somewhere. And there is on your shower stem, listeners, you can go into your shower and see that there's a little round piece that snugs up to the wall. And what's that doing? It's not connected to anything.
No,
it's
it just covers up the hole in the wall.
Exactly. The hole's a little bit bigger than the pipe, and that's there to cover it up. It's not connected to anything. It's just a friction mount. You can slide it to look in there. And that's what I did. I grabbed that friction-mounted little flange and pulled gently, and the entire pipe that the shower head was attached to snapped off in my hand.
Oh,
and,
no.
And so I started, I do the thing that you do where I just, try to jam it back into place. Like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. So anyway.
Yeah. Somebody shook up a champagne bottle and handed it to you.
Yeah, it was just one of those, 2 seconds of panic. There's water everywhere. But I called the home warranty the next day, and they gave me are you sure you want a second opinion to come out? Because if it's not the thing that you say it is, I'm like, listen, I could tell the guy the freaking parts that he needs to bring to fix this problem. And I also told them, don't pay the previous guy. He totally gypped me, and he's gypping you, so be aware. I don't know if that went anywhere. I'm not running it to ground. I don't care. The other plumber came out, saw the problem, was like, oh yeah, here's your problem right here. I'm like, thank you. Fixed it. He was at my house for probably 20 minutes and did everything he was supposed to do. Got the hole in the wall, replaced the part. Everything was working great. But I still have these swollen baseboards, and I still have all this water damage that's on the inside of this wall.
Okay, I can see where this is going. So now you have, the bug in the back of your mind. It's like, all right, we stopped the problem, but I really, this isn't great, and now it's a little bit worse. So how good could it be?
I am required at this point to tear out the bottom 18 inches of drywall and the door jamb and the baseboards on the backside, all the way around. Everything that this water got into. And there's probably mold on the inside of the wall because who knows how long it's been dripping. And it just got to that point where I looked at my wife and I'm like, I'm going to be doing some demo work anyway. Do we want to just do the thing that we've been talking about where we tear this whole thing out and put in the walk-in shower that we've always wanted?
And
well, she gave the green light, and so we decided that's what we're going to do. And so then I started doing the thing that I do, and I started researching every single step of this process to make sure that I got it all straight in my head. And so I don't know how much detail we want to go into that, but
no. So long story short, you planned out a walk-in enclosure with custom glass sides, or did you buy a prefab?
Oh, neither. So the glass was too expensive. We didn't want to waste the money on it. We stripped out the tub and the shower where it currently is. We cut a little bit of the tile that's on the floor to make the space a little bit bigger. We built a custom frame for the wall that's going to be the one side of the walk-in enclosure. I replaced all of the plumbing with new valves and new shower heads. I'm installing 2 extra shower heads, which is going to be awesome.
Oh, man. Jealous.
So, I'm 6'4", and that standard shower head with the arm that comes down sprays me right in my sternum, and I always have to duck, and I hit my head on the shower head if I have soap in my hair. Yeah. And I said, you know what? If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. So Ben, we have the standard shower head where my wife is going to get her shower. Then we're installing a hand shower off to the side, lower, just because that'll be nice to have. And then me, on the other wall, I put it 9 feet in the air. And, I got an 18-inch pipe that comes off it and a giant rain shower. It's going to come straight down from the heavens onto me, and it's going to be wonderful.
That sounds great.
No prefab shower floor because they're too expensive. So right now in the house, there is the first layer of sloped concrete that I installed today is curing. So tomorrow I can put in the second layer and all the waterproofing. All
Holy
of this
cow.
Custom from scratch with the help of my registered contractor brother and dad. Thank you both for your consultations.
Okay, that covers the cognitive gap I was having. Because for me, I hear all this stuff. I think, I could invest all this time watching YouTube videos and checking out books from the library or whatever it is I need to figure out how to do this stuff. But the thing I'm not satisfied with is the learning mistakes of doing it the first time. I don't want those incorporated into my design, and I don't want to have to start over. Because I always do this. Whenever I do something new like that, I get it, but I have to buy the tools I don't have and do the things I've never done before and make the noob mistakes that you are going to make no matter what the first time you do something. And I'd rather just pay someone else to do it that's already made their mistakes and can overcome all that.
So if we were to hire a contractor to do what I'm doing here, it would cost us probably at least $10,000.
Right.
And we're getting away with it for about a third of that.
Wow. All right. Well, so then the question is, if you have the slack, is the opportunity cost of the extra time you spend and those little mistakes and stuff like that worth that $6,000?
So one, yes, of course it is. It's $6,000. Good Lord, opportunity cost. But second, I'm a little unique in this way. Like whenever like little imperfections like that creep into my life, I don't see them as imperfections. I see them as personality. For example, you remember back when I was a single lieutenant, I had that black Mustang.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was one.
That was my Mustang for 6 months.
Well, there you go. Did you notice that there was like a yellowish scrape on one side?
Maybe. It's okay. No longer in my mind.
It was
What happened?
What happened was I was driving into my apartment complex, and I was trying to tailgate the guy in front of me, but he went a little too slow. And so the gate started shutting on my car, and I was like, no, don't hit my car. And I put it in reverse, but I didn't turn the wheel enough, and I kind of scraped one of those yellow concrete pillars that they put to protect like the dialing thing.
Yeah.
And so there was this minor yellow scrape on the side of my car, and I apologized to my car because that was my bad. But at the same time, car. I never stressed about it. I never like even had it looked at to be fixed. It's just like, well, that was a thing that happened, and now it is a part of history, and there it is on my car.
Huh. That's an interesting philosophy. I like that. So do you have any of those yet for your new shower? Not
yet. Good Lord, knock on wood. No, I haven't screwed anything up that I am aware of so far. I just put in the first layer of pitch, and I didn't have. I'm sure I did that wrong, but it looks good. Everything's fine. Nothing's broken. Okay.
All right. Well, I want photos when it's all done, and we'll put them up so listeners can hear now that we've brought them in on all of this.
Do we? I do everything myself. Listeners, there's nothing that you can't do without a bunch of YouTube tutorials. It's totally fine.
Yeah. Now, I'm in my mid-40s, and I've been having a couple of milestones lately that you don't look forward to or hope for, but you know are going to come, where you start to have those things that happen where you feel old, like you need more sleep than you used to. And this week I had the proverbial, I threw my back out. Now, this is something that you hear about as a kid, like your whole life, and you have a vague idea in your mind of what it means, but you don't really know what it means. You'll never know what it means until it actually happens to you. And this week it happened to me. I don't know what, I was working in the yard or something like that. The next morning I tried to get out of bed and I couldn't even move. The pain was so bad. I called the doctor. I wore the patch. I took some pills, and it's been like a week and a half, and it still hurts really bad, and it just makes me feel so old. Now I'm scared. I think I did it moving the trampoline when I was mowing the lawn, but it didn't hurt immediately. It snuck up on me the next day, and now I'm like, what can't I do? This weekend there was a whole crew, and my kids went with them down to New Orleans to help with the relief for Hurricane Ida, and I would normally be all over something like that. I can't go. My back hurts. And I'm afraid that if I go down and try to help, pick up dead limbs that have fallen over on people's houses or whatever, I'd throw it out so bad I couldn't even move.
Ben, let me put your mind at ease for this. How many of your kids went down to help with the hurricane?
2.
You've contributed enough to the cleanup for Hurricane Ida.
I do feel like raising good kids that are willing to go help out with hurricane relief somehow feels like an indirect contribution to society in the same way that being a communications officer helps blow up bad guys.
Let us not equate those because in the military profession, we took direct credit for that. Listen, I made sure the general got his email. I killed 700 people like myself because of those emails. That's not how it works. You get to claim at least, I'd say, 5% of your kid's effort, I think.
But Josh, that was not the biggest old person milestone that happened to me this week.
Okay. What was the biggest old person milestone?
I just found out that I'm going to be a grandfather.
Congratulations. Well, that didn't take long.
I'm sure it's well documented on this podcast that you predicted that it wouldn't take long. And I think I may have been, no, it's going to be a while. So, yeah, it's soon. It's coming up.
I feel like we could probably backtrack this to the honeymoon night, but that we don't have to get that crass about it. Just congratulations. Yes, you are.
Yay. I'm so excited. It's going to be great.
I don't know if I can be friends with a grandfather. That makes me feel
also
old.
Has been said on the podcast before.
But, that makes me feel old by association. That's ridiculous.
I know, and I think I've heard my dad say, I don't feel so old being a grandfather, but then I look over and realize I'm married to a grandmother.
Oh, the subtle masochism, or not masochism, the subtle misogyny of the LDS faith.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm probably misattributing that quote. I don't know who I've heard actually say that. I should have been more anonymous about it because that's not the kind of thing my dad would say.
I'm a little disappointed that like something from the other room didn't come flying in to hit you in the head after saying that.
Alicia tries really hard not to listen while I'm recording because she wants to be surprised when she listens to the show. Oh. I can always tell when she's listening to the show because she just busts out laughing really hard for no reason. I look in there and she's just like doing chores or something.
Excellent.
Has headphones on.
Well, when you're randomly doing something after we've published this episode and she throws something at you from like another room, send me a text message because I'll know which part of the podcast he's listening to.
Yeah, I'm old because I'm married to a grandmother. I want to give a quick Ben versus bureaucracy this week because, like I mentioned, I think on the last episode, I went out and bought a truck, and little did I know that I'd made a kind of a fatal error. And yet another impact of COVID and other weird things that are happening in the world right now. The used car market is really terrible right now. Like, it is not a good time to buy a used car.
Yes, I'm aware of that. I got an excellent trade-in for my truck.
Yeah, so I got this truck, and I feel like I got a pretty good deal on it, but I still paid way more than I wanted to. But I was only able to find it in Dallas, which is 3.5 hours from here. I couldn't find anything in the local area that was just the right price point and features and year and mileage and status. So I bought this car in Dallas, and they drove it over. And I didn't do all the research that you probably do automatically of like what all the documentation and paperwork I have to go through to get it registered in the state where I live. Okay. So I thought the price I paid for it was final, but I was a Louisiana resident buying a car in Texas, and they sent it to me without sales tax that was now on postponement until I go into the Louisiana DMV and try to register the car.
Okay.
So because of COVID right now, they're still at the DMV, they're still taking appointments instead of letting you come in person. But there's only one in all of the area I'm in, one DMV. And then they have these satellite ones that can only do they're contractors that can do a subset of the services.
Right.
So there's one really close to me, and I went to that one. So made an appointment, I went in there. But because they're a contractor, they aren't doing the regular DMV where they have a cranky old lady sitting at the door and goes, "Do you have an appointment?" And if you don't, she kicks you out. Well, at the contractor place, if you come in and you don't have an appointment, they let you sign up anyway. So I happened to go on a day when it was just packed. And I had the title that had finally come in the mail and my paperwork. And I went in on the way home from work. So I was in my military uniform. And I went in and signed into their little iPad they had that lets you put in your name. And then it puts it up on the screen, hopefully. But I wasn't even on the screen yet. So I sat down, I was messing around on my phone, and I fell asleep, and I woke up, and I had 5% battery life left. I was like,
you fell asleep in the DMV?
I was there for 2 hours before my name came up on the board.
All right, that needs to be part of your getting old. You fell asleep in a public place unashamedly.
In uniform. So I wake up and I needed to do something on my phone then, and then it ran out of battery. This hasn't happened to me in a long time, and I think there's another reason that I don't want to talk about right now. And it ran out so much that it shut down. I was like, oh crap. Well, I shouldn't need it for this. Foreboding. And I stuffed it in my pocket. So I'm sitting there, and my name finally comes up on the board after 2 hours, literally 2 hours. And then the guy in front of me in line that's being helped at the window, she asks him for the fee. And I look over, and on the counter, there's a sign that says cash only. It has, I don't know why, but they only take cash. They've got an ATM in the back of the room, but he does the pat down, doesn't have the cash for the transaction. I'm thinking, this guy's not going to be done until he completes his transaction, and I'm waiting. So, and I could just see he was distressed. He was distressed. So he goes over, he tries the ATM. It doesn't work for whatever reason. I'm not assuming a reason. He goes back up to the window, and they're trying to negotiate what to do now with his transaction because he waited 2 hours, got to the window, couldn't get the money, and now what? Because he doesn't have the cash.
I mean, yeah, there's a sign there that says cash only.
Yeah, so I walk up to him, I put my hand on my shoulder, and I said, "Hey, man, how much do you need?" And he says, it's $40. So I open up my wallet and I hand him $40. And he's like, thanks, man. And he says something about like, oh, I'll pay you back or whatever. And I'm just not worried about it. Like, I go back and sit back down. They finish the transaction. He leaves. I go up to the window and start my transaction. She takes my title. She takes my paperwork. Luckily, I have everything. She starts typing it into the system. And she goes, all right, that'll be $1,495.
Excuse me? Pardon? Like, I'm sorry. This is incorrect. I am not buying the car. I already have the car. Like that's the mistake. I'm sorry.
So I talked to her a little bit, and she explains to me that because I bought the car in Texas, and she shows me in my contract that I brought in, that I didn't pay sales tax on it. So I'm now paying at the window for $1,500 for a transaction I thought was already completed. That was not in the budget. I don't know.
Cash only. Do you accept nickels?
Yes, cash only. So I go. So I turn around. I'm like, well, I'm obviously not carrying $1,500 in cash
at the moment.
Yeah. So she's like, well, the ATM's right there.
Did some friendly old person come up behind you and put his hand on your shoulder and say, don't worry, buddy, I got this?
No, but now I'm $40 poorer, so that I have to include that in how much cash I need to take out of the ATM. So I turn around and go back to the ATM, and as I'm headed back, one of the other DMV employees shouts, you can only take out 200 at a time.
It's like, okay, well, I'll do 7 transactions. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah. So I needed to do 8 transactions. So I do 1 transaction, and the transaction fee at this ATM is $4. What a racket. Like, that's the reason they're limiting 200. So I do it twice, and I'm holding a stack of 20s, and then I try to do it again, and I've reached my daily ATM limit fee. So then I reach in my pocket to call the bank.
And you can't because your phone's dead.
And my phone's dead because I've been in the DMV for 2 hours. And I look at my watch, and they close in 5 minutes, and they're going to lock the door.
All right. This was a slow burn of a story, but like all of these things collided at just the right moment to be just so terrible.
Yeah. So I go up to the window. I'm like, I'm going to have to get it, and then someone else shows up, and he's the friend of the guy that I'd given the money to, and he's like, here, buddy, you can use my phone. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, man, but like I have an app on my phone, and I can approve it myself without having to wait for this. So I'm gonna go out to my car, I'm gonna plug my phone in, charge it up, go on the app, and change my ATM limit so that I can take out the cash and pay for the transaction. But thank you very much. So I went out in the car, and I plugged my phone in, and it felt like it took forever. Where it shows the icon on the screen that it's getting juice, but it hasn't powered up yet. It doesn't power on immediately.
Yeah, you were on a ticking clock. They're going to lock that door with or without you. Like,
and they're
going
to lock the door. So I'm sitting there, thinking they're going to lock the door any second, and I'm sitting there kind of stewing and waiting. And then the guy that I'd given the $40 to comes up, and he taps on my window, and I roll down the window, and he hands me the money.
Oh, that's nice, man.
Yeah, so that was happy. Then my phone came back on, and I increased my limit to $1,600, and I went back in, and I start doing the ATM dance. And this is a stupid ATM because it's, how it is. It's a chip ATM, so you have to put your card in, and then it locks. And then you type in your PIN, and then it takes you to the main menu, and then you have to tell it you don't want to check your balance, and then you have to tell it you want to withdraw, and then you have to tell it from checking, and then you have to tell it $200, which is the maximum amount you can take out of that, and then you have to say you approve the $4 fee, then it makes you take your card out, and then it gives you the money, and then you can do it again. And I had to do that 6 more times. Meanwhile, the lady comes over and she locks the door. They're calling for last transactions at the window, and I'm hoping this ATM's not going to run out of 20 because this time I have like a stack an inch high of 20s in my hand.
Going to the clubs.
So I finally get all the money, and I go up to the window, and I pay, and they give me my license plate, which surprisingly was good for 5 years because in Illinois they only renew it for 1. So that was a happy surprise. I got to pay it forward with the guy, and all's well that ends well, I guess. Ben versus bureaucracy. I'm going to call that one a win.
I totally would have gone to the bank and withdrawn $1,500 in nickels. I would have gotten like the smallest denomination that I possibly could have. And like I would have had them give it to me in cloth sacks with dollar signs on them. And that's what I would have handed to that lady. Like, here is the money that you insist must be cash.
Oh my gosh.
How is it cash only? That's got tax evasion and drug dealing written all over it.
I have a Louisiana license plate with a registered sticker that goes out to 2026. I don't care.
I don't care what they're laundering at that place.
It is time for Bad at Logic. So
we are bad at logic.
This week, it is my turn to come up with a logical fallacy, and I've chosen ad hominem.
Ooh, explain ad hominem to us, Ben.
Ad hominem is attacking your opponent's character or personal traits in an attempt to undermine their argument.
Oh, Ben, you're so backwards and don't even understand the real world. How can you even explain this to us? That doesn't make any sense.
That was a great example, and this is a logical fallacy. And it's so tempting because, you want to be able to discredit someone like you might in a courtroom because they're of poor character or even something unrelated completely. But it's a logical fallacy. You should be able to engage on an argument or a debate based on the facts of the matter at hand and not by attacking someone's character or unrelated things about that person.
Ben, I am never going to accept any scientific evidence from anyone that is shorter than me. That's just not a thing.
Wow. What a position to be in.
I've never believed that Fauci character. He can spout his degrees all day. He's only 5'0". He can't possibly be right.
Yeah, Randy Newman made that ironic song, Short People.
I actually can't knock on short people because my wife is less than average height. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and she puts you in your place all the time.
Oh, yes. If I ever feel like I'm taller than her, she knocks the pedestal out from under me until I'm no longer.
So, for Bad at English this week, the term I spoke was something I sent to you this week and realized wasn't on my list, and it is bully. But not bully as in someone who's picking on you, but bully as in very good, excellent.
Yes, it's just an exclamation of joy, and I've heard this before, and you see it on TV. It's always the standard, stereotypical Englishman who says something like that, and it's only ever in context, so you immediately know what it is. Bully!
Right. Good for you. Now, this is interesting because recently it's fallen out of favor, and it gets frequently used in the phrase bully for you, which is most often used in a sarcastic or sardonic way. Hey, Ben, I finished remodeling my shower this week. I finally did it after all this time. Yeah, bully for you, Josh. Mine still sucks.
Well, yeah, humble brags aside, I get that. Because if the intention of the exclamation is joy and cheers all around, huzzah, then saying that it applies only to one person, I mean, it has to be sarcastic. That's the only thing it could be.
Now, this is one of those interesting words that has reversed in meaning. The word bully as an adjective dates back to the 16th century, and back then it meant an excellent person. But now it means someone who picks on people. So I couldn't find a good, reliable explanation for why that happened.
Oh, because anybody that would be a bully back in the 1600s was probably nobility, and they were probably the modern definition of bullies. So it just makes sense that it transitions that way.
Interesting. All right, so that's our Bad at English this week.
Well, before we get off of bully, how do you feel about the modern colloquialism for bully?
Man, I there's so much I think about when I think about the phrase bully. There was this weird transformation that happened between our childhood and our children's childhood, where instead of bullying being acceptable hazing, it actually became unacceptable.
Yes, it made this transition from something that everybody basically experiences as part of their childhood to something that we need to shelter our children from. And I think that speaks poorly for our generation. Because how bad were we bullied that we feel we must end this blight on the planet?
It reached critical mass. We actually had to break the cycle of hazing in our generation.
Or are we just that sensitive? Like the baby boomers and the great, like I can imagine a baby boomer going back to their parents, the greatest generation, being like, I got picked on at school today. You know who picked on me when I was your age? The Nazis. That's who picked on me. And like bullying wasn't even a thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Okay, so there is this kind of common sentiment that takes many forms, but it feels universal in that parents want their children to have it better than they did. It's like the opposite of hazing mentality.
So I agree with you, but at the same token, I feel like there was a stage where I was bullied in middle school, and it was a very formative time of my life where I made some concrete decisions on how I wanted to handle problems and the kind of person that I wanted to be. And for better or for worse, it really made me reflect on some deeper issues in my life. And yeah, looking back, it sucked at the time. But from the hindsight perspective, part of who I am now is because I was bullied when I was a kid. But one of the reasons that I'm so willing to draw that fiery sword of justice and fight for it is because I was picked on as a kid for no other reason than I was smaller than said bully.
There's a phrase we used to say, I don't know if it's fallen out of favor, of that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's only true up to a point. I mean, there are things that will maim you, cripple you for life.
Yes, chicks dig scars, but psychological wounds. And you know what? It is, I will say, it is a difference in kind nowadays than it was when we were kids. Because when we were kids, there was no social media. You only had to deal with the bully when you physically saw the bully. Now
kids today can get bullied to a degree that just exceeds anything our lives were capable of back then.
Yes, they could be bullied 24/7, regardless of geographic disposition.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the reason it transitioned. And maybe that's the reason we're so overly sensitive, is that we just have more access to people being jerks to each other.
That's bleak.
Well, hi, I'm Josh. Have you met me?
Well, okay, one quick happy story before we transition to our main segment. So when we moved to Italy, we were aware that by putting our kids into Italian school, they were going to kind of be odd out. But I maybe assumed a bit rose-colored glasses-y that it would be okay. And at one point, my youngest son that was attending school at the time, I think he was in like first grade, he came and kind of described to us what was bullying behavior, but he didn't know that word. So he was just like, there's this one boy and he's kind of mean to me. And we started talking to him about parental escalation. Like, well, we can talk to the school and they can talk to his parents and they can make it stop and they can watch you. And he kind of absorbed all of this and he's like, I'll just talk to him about it. I think it'll be okay. And then like a week later, my wife asked him, so she was like, so what happened? And he's like, we're friends now. Like,
well, that's first grade. I mean, yeah, kids.
Okay.
That's how it is. So what is your parental escalation for bullying behavior, Ben?
All right. So I actually had an instance. When we were in England, my daughter, who was an 8th or 9th grader at the time, 8th grader, she came home from school one day and she says, I was in class and there was some unstructured time going on where the students were chatting and the teacher was engaged with something. And a boy came up behind me and hugged me from behind and put his arms around me. And she said, I pushed him off and said, stop. And he's like, give me cuddles, which is British for I want a hug. And she's like, no. And he said, fine, then I'll just have to rape you.
That's not a word you're allowed to say at school.
I know. And as a father, when you hear that a young man said that to your daughter, like I saw all kinds of red. Like I was livid. It was a good thing like the school was already closed for the day.
So where did you hide the bodies?
So this is a Ben versus bureaucracy. I was ready to take on whoever I had to take. So the next morning I called into work and said, I'm going to be busy. I need to handle something at my kid's school. I took my daughter into the school and I said, we're here to see the principal. We're not moving until he can see us. I need to tell him about what happened last night. And we described the incident to him. They had my daughter tell him. And then to my delight, but you can't really be delighted in a situation like this, they did everything I wanted them to do.
They just came crushing down on this child as
Yes.
the avalanche of bureaucracy they should have been.
Yes.
That's
all the things.
That's lovely.
they suspended him. They made him write an apology letter. They they increased supervision. Just all the things. Everything I wanted to happen happened.
Man, I feel like that wouldn't have happened in America.
I don't know. I'd like to think it would. If there's anything going on in the world today, you can't have 14-year-old boys threatening rape on 14-year-old girls.
Okay, that's totally valid. And I'm glad that you were able to resolve that, and I'm glad that the school did everything to the level that you expected them to. Because, like, I'm trying to project what I would do if my daughter was threatened that way, and it ends in blood. Like, there is just violence after that.
And I think it felt like it cemented in our relationship an understanding of we'd always just given it lip service up until then. And now something had actually happened that required all of the engagement and involvement. And she saw that we were serious about it.
Well, that's good. That's always a good lesson to impart to your children, that we say we're there for you, but sometimes it's like we actually have to do it too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have not teased this to our listeners before, so they're kind of coming in cold to this. But I had prepped you to let you know that for our feature today, I wanted to ask you some questions about something that you only refer to by with vague terminology, and I want to plumb the depths and see and interview you on what you call your journey of faith.
Wow! And if listeners, you have sensed me trying to drag out the previous segments of this podcast, that may or may not be related to the topic we're discussing today.
So, I sent you a list of questions. I probably won't ask you all the questions on the list, but they're basically going 3 segments. Like what was your journey of faith like when you were young? What was it like in your teenage years when you really kind of started to understand what that might mean and make some decisions for yourself? And then how's it been since then to where you're at today?
Fair enough. We should also tack on the 4th one, like the parenting, because I have my faith or lack thereof, and my wife has her faith or what she believes, and they don't line up, they don't coincide, they're different. And so there's a parenting aspect to that too that we can talk about if you want.
Yes, very good. And I did ask some questions about that as well. Okay, so what is the earliest that you can remember grappling with the idea of God?
The earliest has to be, and not me personally grappling with the idea, but in elementary school. There's always the thoughts, and you hear the other kids talking about church and Bible study or whatever, but there was one day where I was directly confronted. It's like, oh, well, I asked a kid something, or we were talking about it. I don't even remember. But the question was asked to me, it's like, what, you don't go to church? And then I said, well, no. And then because I didn't, and I never had, and it was never even discussed, and so I thought that was normal. But then when the vast majority of the other children within earshot turned and looked at me like I was a weirdo, I thought to myself, maybe this is something that I'm the one that's a little strange here.
Did you know how old you were?
It had to be 4th or 5th grade. So it was fairly early.
Okay.
It was definitely elementary school.
That's an interesting moment. They portrayed those really well a couple of times in the movie Mean Girls, where like she had this really weird upbringing that was kind of outside the norm, but she thought it was normal, and then had this recalibration moment where she found out that her experience was actually the weird one, and and she was the one that wasn't like everyone else.
Right, and you don't know those, and they don't get brought up frequently, so it's just something that happens. Anyway, I do remember asking my parents that night, like, hey, so all these kids go talking about church and Bible school and things, and we don't do that. What's the deal there? And obviously those weren't the words I used because I was not nearly that articulate as a child. And
why don't we go to church or something like that?
Something of that nature. And just like a kid, I'm sure my parents, I remember them sitting down and being very serious and discussing it with me. And I don't remember hardly anything what they said. Because again, I was a kid and my brain was probably elsewhere already by the time they were done talking.
Yeah.
But the gist of it was basically that people can believe whatever they want to believe, and we just don't do that. Okay. That was a perfectly acceptable answer for me as an elementary school kid.
So how long were you comfortable with that idea until something happened that made you grapple with it again?
Probably all the way through the high school. It just, again, religion doesn't really come up when you're kids. That's not a huge...
It kind of does. It's in literature and movies, and you're surrounded by churches, and there's baptisms and bar mitzvahs and weddings and funerals, and
I get where you're going. As a middle schooler and a high schooler, I didn't put a lot of conscious, real thought into my faith or my beliefs or the lack thereof or whatever. I just kind of landed on, I never had any education in it. I never dealt with it in my day-to-day life. It was just kind of a thing. I do remember at football learning the Lord's Prayer, the standard canned thing, because the coaches made us say that before we'd go out on the field.
Really? In a public high school?
In a public high school, yeah. Which, I don't know, now looking back, that's probably a little strange, but I mean, that's the thing that we did.
Man. I mean, we say prayers in military events sometimes, but I don't remember in school ever saying a prayer in sports or anything.
Well, it's funny because I would say the prayer because I just wanted to be, at that point I was still part of the group. I just need to be part of the...
Do you still remember it?
The Lord, not the whole thing.
Okay.
If somebody else was saying it, I could probably jump in, but
okay.
Don't.
That's how I feel about the Air Force slogan. Motto or whatever it is. Yeah, the Air Force
the creed or whatever. But
I can't recite it all, but if somebody else was, I could hang in.
Yeah, there you go. But I do remember one thing, and one clause of it, and it is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I remember that because I remember thinking, I don't forgive anybody that trespasses against me. That's crap.
Okay. Well, but that brings up a good point. The root of that is very much a very Christian idea that Jesus introduced about forgive your enemies and live the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, which is a very religious-based idea.
Well, and that's a very fundamental Christian thing, is everybody treat each other nicely. But in reality, especially in public high school, that doesn't happen. And the way we were just talking about bullying a little bit earlier, the way that I was taught to deal with bullies in middle school and then in high school and then just going forward until my adult years was, if you are confronted with force that against you, then you triple the amount of force and put it right back in that other person's face until they back down.
Did you ever have occasion to actually have to do that?
Yes, multiple times. And to the point where somebody would threaten physical violence, and so my response was physical violence.
I see.
Because it was kind of a scorched earth, thou shall not even come close to me, with that kind of an attitude. It is very Ender's Game. It's you can't just beat him up. You have to put the idea in his head that if he ever screws with you ever again, you're going to get it 10 times worse.
But sometimes as Christians, we do things like recite the Lord's Prayer and then act the way you just described without even thinking of it as hypocrisy. I bet the same coaches that had you recite that then went out on the field and told you to hit the other players hard. Or
they were high school football coaches. Yeah, they were walking hypocrisies. I don't know what to tell you about that.
Okay,
but in high school, all right. So that was the first thing I can remember, somewhat dealing with the religion. But then I started dating a girl. Must have been senior year, or no, junior year. I don't even know. Oh, it was senior year. She was on the track team. Courtney was her name, and she was everything that you want in a high school girlfriend. She was fun and entertaining and pretty, and we did all the things. And we don't have to talk about that. But she was devout Catholic.
Okay.
And I remember she approached me one time, and we've been dating for a couple months. Hey, it's early summer. We're all going on this church retreat. And it was one of those deals where they pile a bunch of teenagers onto a charter bus, bus them out to California. And then we spent one day at Knott's Berry Farms and another day at Six Flags.
So this wasn't like camp at a lake.
Well, no. But half of one day was at a big youth mass that was on the beach with a couple hundred other Catholic youths or whatever.
Got it.
And the whole thing was chaperoned by the Catholic Church, and there was a lot of, it was present this all of the.
So you went on this?
Yeah, I did. I went with her because I saw it as a weekend getaway to California with my girlfriend at the time and going on. I still have pictures in the house with me and my other friends, which apparently I didn't even realize this, but most of the other people that I hung out with were also Catholic, and they were all also on this retreat.
Yeah. Had you ever been to a Catholic Mass before?
No, I had never been to a Catholic Mass before that.
Were they doing the things like where they recite things in Latin and there's call and response with the congregation and stuff like that?
They did all of it. They took communion, and I remember and they said the thing that they do before communion. I don't remember it anymore. But then I remember like everybody started getting up and lining up, and I was like, what do I do? And she goes, you just stay here. I was like, okay. And I stayed there on the beach while everybody else went and got communion. I'm like, what just happened? She goes, we did communion. I go, what's communion? She goes, it's crackers. Okay. They did crackers. That's fine.
I like your simplification of it. So how did all that make you feel?
It kind of like just, I don't know. So like I said, these were my peers. Like all of these kids were in all of the different AP classes with me. A lot of them were on the different athletics teams that I was on. Like this core group of people that I hung out with were the overachievers in my high school. And the fact that so many of them were here at this church doing these things, doing the call and response, and were a part of this community and believed these things, that just, I don't know, it wedged the door open just ever so slightly in my brain to, well, there's a lot.
Maybe I should look into this church thing.
Not that so much as there's a lot of unknowns here.
Okay.
And I didn't know that terminology at the time, but that's really what it was. It was just kind of this little glimmer of there is a lot here that I've been assuming that I just don't know.
Got it. Now talk about the things I'd asked a minute ago about all the things that we typically tend to associate with religion, particularly like an explanation for why bad things happen or, where you go after you die, like those kinds of things. When had you started to think about that, and what did you decide?
So at the time, like I was, again, I had ideas of what I thought the afterlife was and what I thought religion was. And they were very, primordial is the wrong word, but they were just not well constructed in my own mind. Because religion wasn't a part of my day-to-day life, so it just didn't come up. It's not things that I thought about. Like I knew what the lore and things were with the afterlife and heaven and hell, but whenever I really thought about it, it never clicked or made any sense to me. It always felt like it really felt very arbitrary in like, oh, so I follow these rules and then I can go to heaven, but then these guys say the rules are different. And what about like all the Muslim people? What about all of the Far East Asians that believe in Taoism or Hinduism or Buddhism? Or, I mean, there was just so many isms that like...
Those questions you're asking are the exact right questions to ask.
Well, and that's the thing. But from the outsider's perspective, it made it all kind of cancel out. Because there was like so many like individual things that you could point at that say, these people believe this, these people believe this, they are exactly opposite. Therefore, I can ignore them from the outsider's perspective and be fine because clearly nobody knows what's going on.
When you were trying to figure these things out, did you what was your investigative process? So the door cracked open, you're like, maybe I should look into this. What did you do?
So I decided that the best thing that I could do at the time was just to be maybe a little more open-minded about it. Listen to people talk and that sort of thing. I didn't seek any texts. I didn't actually go out and talk to priests or religious figures or anything like that. And it kind of fell off after because, again, this was never part of my culture. My personal.
Did you try to read the Bible?
Later. Like I'm not there yet. But
okay.
The next time I started interacting with religion in any kind of significant way was when I got to college. When I got to the Air Force Academy, I was the first 6 weeks. You don't go. All right, so college starts in the fall. Everybody knows that. But when you go to the academy, you go on like May because you have to go through basic training first. You don't even get to start school until you have your 6 weeks of the same, like getting yelled at, learn how to walk in a line boot camp that everybody else in the military gets. And they honestly use that as
they
also...
front load that on you guys before you're even on the payroll.
Yes, and we lost, I think, 200 people of our class. Like we started...
Whoa!
Yeah. They only accept 1,200... so the academy, 1,200 people showed up for basic training. Every one of them had to be signed off by a congressman or a senator. Like vouched for, vetted, this ridiculous process to get there, and 200 of them couldn't make it through 6 weeks of basic training.
Huh.
But I remember like the first Sunday, we were all in the chow hall, and like the instructors, which are just older cadets,
Yes.
which I did later, which was so fun. But they were up there like, all right, listen, it's Sunday. This is God's day. So those of you who want it, you can go talk to God for the next 2 hours. Those of you who don't, you get to go back to your rooms and you get to write letters back to your family. And I was one of like 3 people in my flight of 20 or 30 dudes and ladies that said, no, I'll go back and write letters. So Ben, the letters were a lie. They were a lie. I got back to my room. I got to write a letter for about 5 minutes before one of the instructors came in and started yelling at me. And as I was doing push-ups, and then I was cleaning my room again. And it was just 2 hours of training by myself instead of 30 people against like 3 instructors.
So what did you take one for the team, and the other 2 guys were they actually writing letters?
No, they were getting screwed with just as much as I was.
Okay.
So that was a lie. So next Sunday,
that's an interesting thing. They hazed you into a religious corner. Like when we asked you if you wanted to go to church, the answer was go to church.
Apparently, yes. That was not the first time that would happen to me there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But then, so the next Sunday comes around and they say, all right, you can go talk to God or you can go back to your room and write letters. Who wants to go talk to God? Me, this guy over here. I'll go talk to God. That sounds fine. And so
if that means I go to the church where they at least let me alone.
Yes. And so then they said, and I got there, and it was the stupidest thing. It's called flow control, where instead of marching everybody over there, it only takes like 5 guys to just put everybody in a single file line. And then when you get to this point, make them all turn 90 degrees that way. So it's like that game Snakes, but with basic trainees. So only like 5 guys had to like...
Because we can't just say walk over to the chapel. It's the most visible thing on campus. You can see it from anywhere. We have to make you march and turn at right angles all the way there.
Yes, and so instead of everybody having to march over there in formations, they just put us in one of those snake game lines, and 5 dudes could control 1,000 people and said, "Go to that building, go!" And screaming at us the whole way and like nonsense.
Now I've been to that chapel, Josh. Even though it is kind of Christian in nature, they make an effort to have all faiths represented there. They have a sanctuary in the basement for like Jews and Muslims and Eastern religions and stuff. So if you were going over there, how did you decide what you were going to go to?
Well, I didn't know. I got flow controlled over there, and they said, "Okay, which chapel are you going to?" And I said, "What do you mean?" Like I thought I was going to the church, and they're like, "There are different churches." And like that's another one of those things. Like I knew in the abstract that there were different faiths that had different buildings, that had different beliefs and did different things. But it was
That's
like
so wild. I can't even imagine what it's like to be 19 years old and not know the difference between like Catholics and Protestants.
Well, yeah. From the outside, it was all just Christianity. It was all just like, do you want diet Christianity or do you want sugar-free Christianity? Like that's what it felt like. So
you didn't consider going down to the Jewish rabbi?
I didn't, but so at the time, again, I'm just basic trainee. My brain is barely working, and I said like, "Oh, I went to a Catholic mass once. Oh, Catholics are in the basement. Go down those stairs." Okay, and then I was in Catholic mass, and that's what I did for basic training. And I learned while I was there, like the challenge response things, and I learned that if I'm in the line for communion, if I do a specific hand gesture, he realizes that I haven't taken communion yet and just does a little hand gesture-y thing over me, and I don't eat the crackers because I did know at that point I wasn't supposed to eat the crackers if I wasn't like
baptized.
Part of it, yeah. So I self-identified as an outsider.
Peace be upon you.
Yeah, there you go, and upon you as well. But there was one time where they did confessions. Like, all right, we're not going to do mass today. We're going to do confession. Because they hadn't done confession for the basics because there wasn't enough time the rest of the time we were there. And this is at the part of basic training where we were now in tents out in what was called Jack's Valley. So instead of being on campus, we were out in the woods and living in tents.
Pretending that you're deployed to the Middle East.
Something like that. It was just an excuse to be closer to like the obstacle course and whatnot. But I remember it's like the priest was just off in the bushes. Everybody waited their turn off in this little clearing, like, okay, you're next. And then you get up and go off into the bushes with this chaplain that's standing
there. You did confession?
And I said, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. This is the first confession that I've ever been to. And it's clear to me that that guy didn't hear a word I freaking said, because he put out this canned 2-minute spiel about how we're going through this difficult time and it's okay and the Lord understands and forgives you and blah, blah, blah. Yea, verily, go forth and be great. And I'm like, that had nothing to do with anything that I just told you.
So did you just take what he said and walk away?
Basically, yeah. It's like, okay, well, he says I'm good. He says the big man understands, so thanks for that, God, I suppose.
Okay, so you're a de facto Catholic at this point.
At this point, I was a default Catholic as a basic trainee.
So throughout your experience at the academy, you just kind of were forced to grapple with religion more than you had the rest of your life. For
basic training, I was forced to grapple with religion more than the rest of my life. But once the academic year started, everything, the dynamic changes. You still get screwed with by upperclassmen, but they like their weekends just as much as we do. So they leave you alone for the most part, unless you're screwing up or in their face or whatever. So stay in your room on Sunday and they won't bother you. But I did still go to a couple of Catholic masses for the first couple of months that I was there as a freshman. And after I realized that every mass was basically the same, where the chaplain would get up and start talking about, like, he'd give his thesis statement and then talk for an hour about being a good person, and here are some references to the Bible and blah, blah, blah. A couple of times I just tuned them out and just started reading I started reading the Bible from the first page. And I realized very quickly that this is not a text to be taken literally. At least, again, I was in the Old Testament, so it's... I don't want to offend anybody when I say stuff like that, but reading the actual text of the Bible really made reinforce in my head, like, oh, this is all allegorical. This is all parabolical.
Josh, I can only assume people that are listening that come from a more typical background where they were raised in some kind of, faith from the time they're very young. I don't think that it's easy to be offended by this situation you're describing. How you made it to 20 years of age without ever happening, and you're just sitting there because you kind of got forced to be there in basic training, and you open up the Bible and you're like, all right, what is this Bible thing? Like, to reach the age of 20 without even knowing, and you're just like opening it up to the first page and start reading it, because that just boggles my mind. I can't even imagine how cool it would be to have that degree of unspottedness.
But I guess the thing that you need to realize is that I didn't. Like, I was not coming into this with a completely fresh and open mind, because I was at the time 18 years old, and I had never been exposed to it early on in my life, and so I felt, I'm not going to say like hostile towards it, but I was very, very skeptical coming into it, and so while I feel like at the time I had an open mind. Like, I told myself I was being open-minded by giving it a chance and reading the Bible and trying to listen to the chaplains and things. But at the same time, I was still coming into it and like picking apart what they said, like listening to the chaplain give his sermon and picking the pieces apart. Like, he's saying be a good person. None of this has anything to do with the actual religious portion of it. Like, just that fact, like that I'm trying to separate the message from the religion, just shows you the mindset that I was in. Like, I wasn't...
You're a bit antagonistic.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. And I was a young man, and I thought I knew everything because I was 18 years old, so yeah.
At some point, were you ever like, maybe I should go check out the Protestant?
I did. I did. After I got about halfway through the Old Testament, and I got to the 20 or 30th section of the Old Testament where it's 3 or 4 pages of who begot, who begot, who begot, who begot, who begot, who begot.
Yeah,
okay,
very good. The begats.
Yeah. And I'm just like, why do I have 3 pages of begats? Oh, and then something interesting happened. Okay, this is not a book to be taken literally. So then I went to the Protestant chapel. And I went to the Protestant service up in the big room. That's the one. That's the big one. That's where you get like the stained glass windows and what everybody thinks of as the chapel at the academy.
Yeah, the top floor.
Side note, that was designed as the centerpiece of the academy to kind of show one of the pillars of good military service
It's
is
breathtaking.
Is faith. The building itself leaked like a sieve when they first constructed it. It took several renovations before it was actually watertight.
They're doing another $10 million renovation right now. I think it's closed.
It was closed for several months while I was there. Like, they're doing it all the time because while it's a good-looking building, structurally, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and it's a tough geography, too. Like you said, the wind always blows real hard, and it's right there at the feet of the mountain.
Another fun fact about the academy, there's this giant open square in the center between all the major buildings, and it's grass for like parades and formations and things. But in one corner of it, there's this weird hill, and we called it Spirit Hill. And it's in a really weird place. It's not even centered on anything, but the reason that they put it there is because every once in a while, back in the day when it was flat, the wind would come off the mountains in such a way and go into the courtyard of one of the academic buildings and create a vortex that would shatter every window in that building. And so it was the aeronautics department that figured out if they put a hill just so, it would break up that wind flow, and it never happened again.
Awesome. Now, back to your journey of faith. While you were doing all this, did you find someone that you had an affinity for? Was there like a priest or a leader or even just a fellow student that you thought maybe they've got this figured out and you were drawn to them? No. I didn't have any mentors or any leaders in faith. I had a couple of. The reason I went to the Protestant services after there was a friend of mine in my squadron that did go to the Catholic services with me, and I talked to him a couple of times, and he wasn't like, he was kind of insular and standoffish about it. Like when I'd ask him questions, he just kind of like shrug it off. I'm like, well, I mean, that's just what it is. It is what it is. And he didn't have the training or the academic background to be answering any of my in-depth questions anyway. So then when I was like, okay, well, let me try some other things and do the other services. I remember a couple of guys like, oh, you should come do the Protestant one. Okay. And that was in the big church. I went to a couple of those services, and I feel like we spent 2/3 of the time in there singing songs. And like, I'm in the building, like looking at this book and trying to sing a song that you don't know the music to, and thinking to myself, like, I'm not here for karaoke. Like what part of this is religious? So, which happened first? You graduated, or you felt like you reached a place where you didn't need to kind of carry on investigating whether or not God exists anymore?
About halfway through my freshman year, I stopped. I did go to the All Faiths room once because they have a big chapel for the Protestants, a smaller chapel for the Catholics, and then there's like an All Faiths room like you talk about where they have a schedule for the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Muslims and everybody else. And I tried to go to one of the Jewish gatherings and was told, quite frankly, that wasn't for me. Like, I got to the door and they're like, no, you're fine. You should go to the other side of the building where the Protestant chapel was.
Wow.
It's like, oh, okay. So about halfway through my freshman year, I kind of stopped like going after organized religion because at the time that I was going to these things, like it really boiled down to, it didn't matter which room I was going to. They're all spouting the same messages. Be good people, be good to each other, like do the right things. Like just that's, it felt like that's what it was boiling down to.
All right. Now I'm going to get existential here for a second. If there were a God and part of his plan was for him to only reveal himself to us in a spiritual sense rather than a physical sense, do you feel like you ever had any kind of spiritual connection or knowledge that wasn't one of your regular senses?
Not really. So this might be, I don't know where I got this. Like I can only thank my parents or curse my parents, depending on your perspective. But I've always been brought up with a very supportive family. And one of the lessons that they indoctrinated me with, and I don't know how they did it, but I thank them for it, is that I have agency. Everything in your life is within your scope of control. If you don't like something, fix it. And I've never been in a situation where I have felt utterly powerless, if that makes sense. Like, I've never been put in such a terrible place in my life where I felt completely everything was out of my hands.
Yeah.
There was always something I could do. It didn't matter how desperate it was or how far-fetched. There was a plan that I could make. There were steps that I can do. There is a course of action that only I can initiate. And so I don't think I've ever reached a point in my life where I was completely open to the idea of the universe or God or whatever to provide me with guidance in a moment like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but do you think that feeling like you didn't have agency would be evidence of God?
No, I did it the other way around. At least in college, I felt like God and organized religion in these communities existed for people that either didn't feel like they had agency over their own lives or didn't have the internal fortitude or willpower to enforce their will upon the universe. And that is a very, now as a more understanding and emotionally mature person, I feel like anyway, that is a very ignorant and closed-minded thing to say. To be like, oh, well, I don't need God in my life because I'm just better than everybody.
It's a bit of a self-parody. Have you ever heard the country song, Jesus Take the Wheel?
No, but I've seen the memes.
Okay. I mean, that's out there. I don't subscribe to that particular type of faith, but I understand how some people just, the way they're more comfortable with understanding really the answer of why bad things happen in the world is just because they don't understand everything and they're willing to just not think about it. Just put it over into some supreme being's hands and relinquish control.
And honestly, I feel like sometimes this might be the reason I'm so antagonistic or so pessimistic or just so willing to draw that flaming sword of justice, because I feel like there is no cosmic sense. Nothing out there is going to fight for me or for justice or for what is right. I'm the one that has to do it. You know what I mean?
I hope you're wrong about that, but yeah, I know what you
mean. I guess it just kind of informs my character a bit, just thinking those things.
So you had these experiences when you're young and when you're a teenager, and then when you're at college, they were kind of forcing you to grapple with it, but you're becoming firmer and firmer in your idea that what's your philosophy at this point?
All right. So when I started college, I was more open to the idea than when I ended it. And just the idea of there being a God and religion, because of the fact that, again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I wanted to go out and learn. And so then I spent the time going to the organized religion, and I tried to read the Bible. And that's when I started feeling like, oh, well, I think I kind of get it, and this isn't for me, and this doesn't coincide with my worldview. But then also, there was just a couple of incidents that, this is just a bad personality trait of mine, but sometimes if you challenge me with something, it's the backfire effect. It just made me entrench in my current position.
Okay.
So, for example, there was a point in my military or my academy career where an opportunity arose where you could do an exchange program with another military academy, where you would spend a semester at West Point or Annapolis, which is the Army and the Navy colleges or equivalent. And it's a one-for-one swap. A handful of cadets from West Point come to the academy, and the equal number go to West Point for a semester, and you do things the way that they do. And I applied for the exchange program for West Point. And one of the steps in that process for application was an interview with a board of, military officers at the time. And I remember going into the room, and there was 3 people. They were all majors. And one of the majors asked me, it's so on your sheet you filled out no religious affiliation. What church do you go to? I said, oh, well, sir, currently I don't go to any church. I attended Catholic Mass for a little while as a basic, but I'm not really religious in that way. And this guy looked me straight in the face and said, okay, well, you realize you're failing one of the pillars of the academy, correct? And I was just, I had no answer to him. Because at the time, the 4 pillars are academics, athletics, military, and spiritual. Those were the pillars.
So you hadn't thought through what the right way to answer that question is.
Well, but at the same time, I think it was
absolutely
BS that the guy was asking me that in the first place.
Well, I don't know. I think he's just. I'm gonna antagonize you a bit here. I think he's justified if those are documented and written down as the doctrinal four pillars of the academy. If he is shortcutting the spiritual pillar as do you go to church, do you have a religious affiliation, I think maybe if you thought about it, you'd realize that there's other ways to fulfill that idea of having a spiritual pillar in your life that aren't going to church.
Well, when he asked me this question, he knocked me back a bit, like on my heels. But then after a second, I collected myself and I answered, well, sir, you'll see you have my records. You'll see that I'm excelling, at least at the time anyway. I am excelling in the other three categories, and I don't feel like I need all four pillars to be a solid candidate for this program. But clearly I did, because I was not selected.
Okay. Interesting. I did not know about that. Wow.
But it's just one of those things. Like this was not the only time in my life. There are scattered instances where I was directly confronted with the idea that I was somehow subpar, or somehow not excelling, or somehow less than perfect because I didn't affiliate myself with some tribe, with some religion, with some dogma. That approached me like 3 or 4 different times. And each time, all it did was grate on me and make me feel like, really? Is this what we care about now?
Okay, so I'm going to try to nail you down a little bit. So as you're graduating from the academy, what was your actual, what was your dogma? What did you believe?
By the time I got out of the academy, I was strongly atheist. Now, I'm
as in denying the existence of God and the erroneousness of all religion.
Yes. It's like, I don't think God exists. When I graduated college, like, these are not my current beliefs, but when I graduated college, I did not think God existed. I didn't think there was any such thing as a metaphysical soul. Anything that we can't measure scientifically didn't exist. Spirituality was just a cultural phenomenon and a psychological desire to belong or relinquish some sort of responsibility in one's own life. And that was what I believed.
Okay. So then you left the academy and you were kind of got out of the environment where this would be something that was in your face. Like once you got out to the regular Air Force, you're just living at a base. You know, no one's asking you if you're going to church or not, and there's no opportunities coming up where that's a discriminator.
So this is while this is a true statement, I will never forget. There was one barbecue we went to as for the 1st Communication Squadron. I don't know if you were there or not, but I was there.
I may have been.
And we were at this barbecue, and I was standing in line, and behind me was the group chaplain, and he was just talking to people and just doing his thing. And he asked me, he's like, "Oh, so what services do you attend?" And I was like, "Oh, actually, sir, I am atheist." And this guy's face lit up. He goes, "Really?" And this guy glued himself to me for the next hour.
Oh, no.
And he was just... I felt like a butterfly that he had never seen before. And he was just so fascinated with the concept of somebody that didn't just... I didn't have faith, but I actively disbelieved in all active religion. And he just... Like the look on his face was a mix of curiosity and pity almost. Just like, oh, you poor fool. And like it was kind of grating, honestly.
Like Stacy on Wayne's World, she was just glued to you. Okay, so if you had the Omega-13 and you could activate it and go back 13 seconds, what should you have said to that chaplain?
What should I have said to the chaplain?
Mormon. The correct answer is Mormon.
Yes, Mormon. Mormon was the correct answer. No. What is the correct answer? The guy's like, "Oh, so what? How are you spiritual? Or what is your faith?" I don't know. Maybe the correct answer was just to slap him and then turn back forward in line. Well, sir, that's none of your damn business, and I'll appreciate you for staying out of my personal affairs.
Okay, so your life is punctuated with these moments. Are you...
Hang on. There was another time early in my lieutenant career where there was this coworker that I had that just couldn't wrap his mind around the idea that I was a moral, intelligent person and had no faith. And this guy just... Like, he wouldn't let up, man.
Was it me?
It's you. He kept giving me, literature, and he would, bring it up every time we were together. Yeah, no, it was totally you.
It's because I love you.
All
right, so
You can wave at me from heaven. You'll see my boat like crossing the sticks. It'll be fine.
So you have all that behind you. You're coming up on some of the life milestones that make you kind of have to grapple with this again. One is, of course, meeting and marrying your wife, and then the next is having children. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Oof. So first of all, a huge thank you to my wife for agreeing to yoke herself to me. I do recognize and appreciate the spiritual sacrifice that she's making. Even if she doesn't believe in that thing specifically, there are a lot of people that do. She's taken a huge risk with her, soul by being with me, and that speaks a lot to her character.
Think it's mature that you recognize that, because that is something that a person of faith, if they decide to, like you said, yoke yourself together, and that's a term Christ uses in the scriptures to describe a marriage. That you're kind of taking a risk on them.
And I can only hope that in a just and fair universe, if God does exist, that my sins or my beliefs won't reflect poorly on my wife or my children. But I don't think that. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Life milestones, marrying my wife. The first time that smacked me in the face is the first time I met my in-laws. They're great people. Jay and Kim, love them to death. They are genuinely fun to be around. But the first time we met, they came out to visit us in Virginia, and they had known me for all of, 20 hours. When I asked them, Nicole was separated from us for a bit, and I said, listen, Jay and Kim, I know you don't know me very well, but I love your daughter very much, and I am going to ask her to marry me. And before that, I just wanted to let you know, and I want to have I want to know if I have your blessing. And I'm not going to go into specifics on what they said, but I think my brother summed it up the best when I was talking to him about it after the fact. Yeah. And he said, when you ask somebody, can I marry your daughter? There's only two answers. There is yes and everything else.
Yeah. And you fell in that category.
I fell into that second category. But I like to think that since then, they have recognized that I'm not the monster that I was as a younger person, and that hopefully they still like me. I don't know. I like them very much. But you know how it is with in-laws. They can hate your guts. And that's totally their right.
So different from your upbringing where your parents just didn't bring you to church and raise you to be moral without a belief in God as the foundation of all of that. And you married your wife, who kind of came from the opposite, where she was raised by a couple that were Christian and brought her up as Christian, and that was a big part of her life. Yes.
The spirituality is a big part of my wife's life. Now, I'm not going to speak for her because I don't have nearly enough basis and understanding of where she is at religiously. The way that I honestly categorize it in my mind is that she is a very spiritual person, and she has her own beliefs. And whether or not she goes to organized religion or believes in organized religion is neither here nor there. Like, she is a spiritual person. This is a big part of her life. And whatever else is like anybody thinks is irrelevant. Like, she is what she is, and that's fine for me.
So back in the 2005-2006 timeframe, you used to call yourself atheist, but lately I've heard you start to use the term agnostic. Talk about what the difference between those two is to you and why you changed.
So the atheist is in itself a faith, and any atheist that says like, "Oh, I have no faith," well, they're full of it. Because it's a logical fallacy to try to prove a negative. So Just like you can't prove the existence of God, it is equally illogical to try to disprove the existence of God. Just because we can't touch measure it doesn't mean it might not possibly exist.
I appreciate that you acknowledge that.
Well, and I have to. It's one of those things, like if I want to always be right, I have to always be willing to change my mind. And so this is why I have switched over to agnostic. I can't disprove the existence of God. And frankly, when you tell people you're atheist, they take that as a militant, standoffish position. I was never militant to the point where like, oh, well, you are wrong for believing, and here's all the reasons why. I never confronted people. I tried not to confront people about their faith. But as an older, more mature person, I realized that I can't disprove that, and trying to take that stance is just arrogant again. So, you know what? I'm at this point now where believe whatever you want to believe, as long as it doesn't impact or affect me or my life or my freedoms or my kids, then you do you, man. I don't care.
Okay, so you just brought up kids, which is an interesting thing because now that you have kids and you have a interfaith marriage, you kind of have to grapple with like, well, what do we do now that we have kids? Do we take them to church? Do we teach them about God? Do we get them baptized? What do we do?
So baptism is my wife. Baptism is, I don't know enough about it to talk at an educated level. It means different things to different faiths and different people, so I'm not going to go there. The way my wife interprets baptism is it needs to be a personal choice. And my kids aren't old enough to make that choice. And we're not going to make that for them. So that's where the baptism discussion ends basically in our family. When it comes to the faith thing, I don't discourage faith in my kids. What I am trepidatious about, this has been my stance from the beginning, is my kids are young. My kids will take what I tell them as the truth. They trust me. I'm their parent. Like their teachers. What their teachers tell them is the truth. What people that are what adults in authority positions say to them, they believe because they're kids. And so I don't want to put them in a position where they go to a building and all of the adults sit down and face a person that is standing up on a pillar in front of a podium and speaking to them in an authoritative manner and dictating to them what is the truth. Because whatever that guy says, my kids are going to believe 100% because they're kids. They're in a room full of adults that are listening to this other adult. Well, that adult obviously has a ton of authority and he must be saying the right things. Then subconsciously, they're just going to swallow everything that guy says. And
so are you saying you don't want to put them in that position?
It's this weird place that I'm in because I want my kids to be mature enough to understand that this may or may not be the truth. I want them to have a healthy amount of skepticism when they listen to other people tell them what they should think, when other people tell them what they should believe, because that's such a powerful thing to instill in somebody. Like I want them to have enough skepticism to weed out the bad things or the things that are going to manipulate them down the line. But at the same time, like they could easily fall in the same category that I was in, where by the time I got around to seeking faith, I was so skeptical and was not exposed to it early enough to where without realizing it, I had made a decision and I was just looking for ways to disprove everything that was told to me. So
yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting that you recognize that.
I want my kids to have open minds. I do. But at the same token, like, how do you judge when a kid is emotionally mature enough to take what he's hearing with a grain of salt? I don't know. When it comes to organized religion, I don't know if there's a good answer for that. What we've settled on, what we've been doing in our household is every once in a while, if my kids ask the questions, my wife will answer like 100% with what she believes. And I will not discourage that. But what I will say at the end of that is that's what mommy believes. And that's what some people believe. Not everybody believes that. And you just have to decide for yourself. Like, what do you think is right? And what do you think the world should be? And like, just, I'm not trying to actively disprove.
How comfortable is she with you saying that?
Well, I don't honestly. I don't really know, and I don't want to speak for her. I feel
Okay.
I feel we've not come to blows. We've not had knockdown, drag out arguments about it or anything. And a part of the reason I hope part of the reason is that I'm never trying to discredit what she is saying. I'm always just trying to reinforce the fact that my kids need to decide for themselves what they want to believe and what they think is right.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that kind of scenario up because you would assume that Alicia and I would always see eye to eye, but even sometimes we don't necessarily agree on things. And I remember there's a topic recently, it's regarding prayer, that when it'll come up in our scripture study or our family, I'll mention and talk about my feelings concerned of it, and she'll frequently disagree with me about it in front of the kids. And just 2 weeks ago, I think, we brought it up and had that disagreement. And then she stopped and she got a thoughtful look on her face and she turned to the kids and she says, "Kids, I want you to know that your father and I both believe in God. And the fact that we disagree about this doesn't mean that there's a problem." And she says, I'm actually very sympathetic to the things your dad says about this. And she described my position really well. And she said, I just have this other perspective on it. But, I've been thinking about what your dad's been saying. And I was like, wow, that was such a mature analysis of the situation, and considering how our journey together, that even as 40-something adults, we're still trying to learn and grow and figure out how all of this fits into our lives, how that discussion between us affects the journey they're going through right now as young children.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to do is instill my kids with something that's going to hurt them or affect their lives in a negative way down the road. And this is one of the few things that I have specifically against not faith, but religion. There are too many instances and there are too many ways that individuals with bad intentions have used organized religion in negative ways. There's a million examples throughout history.
I can't disagree with that at all. And it's one of the chief arguments of atheists for why religion is bad.
Religion, I believe, is not the best. Like, there's a lot of bad things, but at the same time, there's a lot of good things that come from religion. I'm not going to dog on religion. What I am going to say is you need to approach religion the same way you approach everything, with that healthy level of skepticism and just be on your toes. Just because it's associated with faith doesn't give it a blank check to write what the truth is in your brain. Faith is different. Faith is an individual thing. Faith is an individual's relationship with the spiritual realm, be that God, be that the Buddha, whatever. Like, you can have all the faith you want. That doesn't bother me at all. The organized religion scares me.
What kind of things do you have faith in?
I have faith in myself. I have faith in my family. I have faith in my ability to change things that seem like they can't be changed. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, that sounds super arrogant, but no, I have faith in me, and that's really all I can have faith in. I do have faith in my wife and my family and my friends, because I've known them enough to give them that kind of faith. I don't know. I don't know how to answer this question very well.
Well, I think, we started off by entitling this discussion about your journey of faith. So a journey kind of infers that there's a destination. You'll have to let me know if you feel like you've ever gotten there, or if you... what does the future hold? Okay, so faith, there is no destination. So I firmly believe, like, if we're talking on the religious or the spiritual sense, that we are a cosmic coincidence. Like, the fact that our DNA arranged itself in such a way as to develop a consciousness that is aware of things that may or may not actually be real, that we can think in abstract terms, is nothing more than an emergent property of an intelligence that allowed us to survive beyond and better than our peers. I believe that we live in a universe that does not care that we exist, that the only thing it knows is physics and entropy, and that the only meaning that life has is the meaning that we define for ourselves individually as we're living it. And that when I die, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to be unconscious. And it's scary and liberating at the same time, because whereas I'm not worried about any afterlife, because I'm going to die and I'm going to be unconscious and it's going to be black. And it's the same way that you don't worry about going to sleep at night, because when you're asleep, you're not afraid that you're not going to wake up. You don't feel anything. Time just slips and it's gone. One thing that kind of freaks me out a bit is consciousness in of itself is such a unique and strange thing, because from my perspective, I'm the only thing in the universe that has consciousness. I'm the only thing that is experiencing life in the way that I'm experiencing it, because I can't prove definitively that anybody else is having an experience like I do. I look down at my hands and I have this perspective from where my eyeballs and my head are, but I can't confirm that's how other people see the world. I can't. Like, they can tell me that, but I can't prove it, and neither can they. So you could all be robots or simulations for all I'm concerned. Like, there's no way for me to know that or not. So it's this kind of weird, little scary, little liberating existence that, like, this is the one life we've got, so make it worth it. Yeah. Well, Thanks for filling in some of the gaps I had on your journey of faith, Josh. I appreciate that. Yeah, you'll have to let me know if you feel like you ever arrive somewhere.
Yeah, if I decide to get baptized into the LDS faith or whatever the equivalent is, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'll come out and do it.
Yeah, I'll let you dunk me into the river or the canal or wherever body of water we find here in Arizona.
All right. Well, we teased last time on the Bad at Magic podcast that we were going to do a book review next time. So I think we both started reading it. But I forgot to warn my mother not to try to read World War Z.
Your mom doesn't. What's wrong with World War Z? Like, this is a good book.
It's a horror book, Josh. My mom doesn't watch or consume horror things.
Well, to be fair, I concur that horror things freak me out, Ben. I can't watch a horror movie and not have nightmares. I actively avoid horror genre media. This book only has 3 or 4 chapters that can be described as horror. The rest is really like a very strategic, high-level discussion of what the apocalypse would look like.
But in the form of like an R-rated movie, dropping the F-bomb, being a bit cynical and crass, just the kinds of things my mom generally tends to avoid. So.
All right, well, Ben's mom, I'm sorry. If you started reading it and were offended, that's my bad.
She just decided zombie book wasn't for her and got her Audible credit back. I'll help you with that if you need it, Mom. But if you want to join in with us reading, it'll be great. But if not, I can tell it's going to be a great discussion next time. We'll just be talking about fantastical scenarios, but also interesting concepts like global politics and military capabilities, and it'll be great. It'll be a good discussion. So that'll be next time. If you heard anything that we talked about today that you want to engage with, you can go to our subreddit, or you can go to our Facebook page, or you can go on our website. We put a lot of effort into making sure that those places are available for you to interact with the show.
If you like what we talk about, then consider sharing us with a friend. I feel like that's the least you can do. If you like listening to us, maybe your friends will like it too. If you really, really enjoy these discussions we have where Ben asks me existential questions and I go on long, rambling rants about my experiences in life, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. It is crazy the amount of visibility we can get from something like that. Lastly, if you want Ben to continue to pester me about my faith forever, for the rest of time, until one of us is dead and actually is in the afterlife, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.